Joseph and Moses, although having lived in different time periods, were considered significant leaders in their time. Despite the fact that their stories were written hundreds of years apart, there's a clear linkage between the two as both their life experiences somewhat mirror and reflect each other. Though the stories of their governance happened thousands of years ago, the lessons that we can learn from these stories can be reflected in our own lives in the present as well. Joseph was a young man with 11 brothers and a father named Jacob. Because he was one of the youngest in the family, he was clearly his father's favorite, making him hated and disliked by his brothers. Because of this, his brothers planned to kill him in order to get rid of him. Although they didn't end up killing him, they instead sold him to become a slave in Egypt. While being the slave of Potiphar, a wealthy Egyptian merchant, he was falsely accused of rape by Potiphar's wife and ended up in jail. Though Joseph was experiencing a very tough point in his life, he always believed that God was with him. One day, the Pharaoh of Egypt had a strange dream, and the only person who was able to help understand and interpret it was Joseph, because he knew that God was with him to help him do so. He interpreted that there would be 7 years in Egypt with a great abundance through the land, then after that would come 7 years of famine. Because of this, the Egyptians knew to prepare for the time of famine, and thus the Pharaoh appointed Joseph to be second in command to him. As a leader, Joseph was able to demonstrate to us his faithfulness, humbleness, and mercy. Even though Joseph encountered many turmoils and perils that he did not deserve, his faith to God never wavered. When preparing for the 7 years of famine, he always knew that he was being guided by God to do the right thing and that he was leading these people in order to honor God. Joseph was also humble because he remained the same honorable person when he was appointed to be the viceroy of the Pharaoh. Despite his high position, he never let his power change him. Moreover, Joseph was also a merciful leader as he was able to forgive his brothers after being sold by them as a slave. Through these examples, Joseph is able to illustrate the good governance that every leader should exemplify. On the other hand, Moses was also a righteous leader in his own and different way. While Joseph was sold to become a slave, born into a rich family, and was highly favored by his father, Moses was born a slave, as the Pharaoh during his time ordered that all Israelite babies to be born should be killed. Because of this, Moses' mom put him in a basket and set him off on the Nile River, where he was found and adopted by the Pharaoh's daughter. Although he grew up as a prince of Egypt, he always remained loyal to his Israelite heritage. Throughout his reign, there was always one thing that Moses fought for: justice. When he saw that the Egyptians were enslaving and beating the Israelites, he took a stand and confronted the Pharaoh to let the Israelites go. He always defended those who fell victim to injustices and inequality, and he did not hesitate to accept God's call to lead the Israelites to freedom. It was clearly shown in the story that Joseph and Moses have contrasting personalities that mirror each other's lives. Joseph was born in Israel, but became professionally successful in Egypt. Moses was born in Egypt, but established his place in history by taking the Jews on their way to Israel. Joseph was the insider who chose to move outside. He dreamt of Egyptian agriculture as well as the cosmic universe. Moses was the outsider, the prince of Egypt, who insisted on coming inside by slaying the Egyptian taskmaster. Joseph brought his family to Egypt. Moses took his people out of Egypt. In the present day, the story of Moses and Joseph can be interconnected to the government in the context of the Philippines, wherein the administration we are under is that of Duterte's. The story of Moses and Joseph show that God does not choose the qualified, but qualifies the chosen. In the issue of Duterte's drug war, us Filipinos are put in a position where we are worried by the actions of our current president. We believe that both the president as well as the citizens can learn from these stories. Our president, for example, can look to Moses and Joseph's way of leading, where it is just and right, and learn to better himself for the welfare of his country. And it is our job, not only as Filipino citizens but as God's followers, to trust in God's timing as well as His plan in choosing Duterte as our president.